what is the role of the diaspora when it comes to the internal changes that I think the vast majority of our community would like to see. Oftentimes, democratization in Iran since 1906 has been described as 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I would say that perhaps there's a sense amongst many of us that after the 2009 elections, there's been about 100 steps back. And there's even more frustration in our community because at the moment in which, as was said in the previous panel, there would be a desire to have much more focus on what's taking place inside, we have all of these external tensions and all of these discussions about essentially ends up being pretty bad options, or at least the focus of the internal change doesn't seem to come about. In all of that, I think there is a lot of sense amongst many people in our community that democracy at the end of the day will have to come from inside the country, not the outside. At the same time, though, I think it's a legitimate question to ask oneself, what role can or should the diaspora play in all of this? Diasporas, in other cases, have played constructive roles. Doesn't mean that everything they would do would be helpful. But what is that role that in this specific circumstance the diaspora can play? Because I think it would be quite frustrating to think that as we watch developments in Iran, there's nothing that people on the outside who have their roots in Iran cannot do. We have a fantastic panel today to talk about this issue. People who have, in many ways, been at the forefront of this struggle. In fact, 3 out of 4 were jailed in Iran. The 4th one was the smartest one, I assume, Nazila. She got out right in time. But if we start from the far end, we have Bijan Khajehpour, who is widely recognized as one of the most prominent analysts of Iranian politics and economics, who was active in Iran up until the 2009 elections, in which he was also incarcerated. Ramin Jahenbegloo, of course, is not only known within the Iranian community, but internationally as one of the foremost thinkers about democratization, about nonviolent resistance. And he has also spearheaded an initiative called Charter 91 on how the diaspora can play a role in this. Maziar Bahari, I'm sure everyone here has heard of, who was a prominent filmmaker, journalist for Newsweek in the past, for the BBC, and also someone who was recently came out a book about his family's history, because his struggle is not just his own generations, it goes back at least 2 more generations, I assume, and who also was in prison over the 2009 elections, accused of spying, which seems to be a standard accusation over there. Nazila Fathi wrote for the New York Times as the correspondent of the New York Times in Tehran for about 8 years, I believe. Over 10, I'm sorry. And in that knows everyone that matters in Iran, going from the political leadership to the activists on the streets, and I think has a fantastic perspective of seeing how the diverging views have evolved over time, particularly over crises such as this one. This panel is going to be more of a conversation style rather than straight presentations, and I'm going to start it off by asking the obvious first question to just give me a quick assessment. After what happened in 2009 and the aftermath of that, where exactly is the struggle for democracy inside of Iran right now? On the outside, there's oftentimes a tremendous frustration. A frustration thinking that there's little that we can do about it, only bad options that are being presented. And at the same time, life in Iran seems to go on, but we're not seeing the kind of things that we used to see. We're seeing more newspapers being closed down, we're seeing more people going to jail, and we're seeing less conversation about human rights and about the internal factor than we did 3 years ago. If I could have everyone just give a quick reaction about that, and also in that, try to give a quick note of what is the sign of hope that you see. Mindful of the fact that internally when it comes to Iran's political structure right now, Khamenei seems to have succeeded in more or less eliminating all major opposition. Having done that, what are his incentives to open up the political space again? What are the bases to be able to get change right now? We can start off with Nazila.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I totally agree that if any kind of change is going to happen in Iran is going to come from inside the country. It is useless for Iranian expats sitting outside the country to start discussing what kind of change they want to see inside the country, while activists in Iran are risking their lives, writing, working, and going to prison. And especially at the time when the main discourse is coming from inside the country. The talks that we are hearing on every front, on civil rights, on democratization, on women's rights, all that talk is being produced inside the country. Regarding what has happened in the past 3 years and where this movement is now, I don't think the movement is dead by any means. If it is more silent, if it has sort of embraced pacifism at this stage, it doesn't mean that it is dead. It is dormant. But still we're seeing that the discourse, the conversation is still going on the ground. I mean, when you see Ahmadinejad's advisor, Mr. Javanbek, writes an article in the national newspaper about Chador, that Chador is not an Iranian thing, that Chador was just something that came into the country 100 years ago. It doesn't have roots in Islam. You see that even people who have been part of the repression against civil society are engaging in the conversation that is going on the ground. I think as a community of expats, what we need to do is to help this community, provide them with the platforms that they need to keep this conversation going on. In the past 3 years, they have come under increasing pressure. There were two major platforms that they were using, the satellite television and the internet. I totally disagree with those who argue that these two platforms were not contributing to struggles on the ground. They were the main sources of a place, an area, and space where people were talking about these things. They were expressing their disagreements there. They were debating with each other. They were coming up with new solutions. I think as expats, we have to play a role in keeping these two platforms viable for Iranians. You know that in the past week, Iranians have been having difficulty getting on Gmail, using Google search engine. There are ways that expats can help Iranians inside the country. And the other one is the satellite TV, which has been the most important source of giving information to people, shaping public opinion. Without it, in 2009, the Green Movement wouldn't have been able to galvanize so many people behind the movement. And there were people from different backgrounds with different demands who all came behind the Green Movement because they were seeing gruesome pictures on their TV screens, how the government was suppressing people. These channels are very important, but the way they are presenting themselves are not the way that Iranians inside the country want to see them. In many ways, they are not reflecting what the concerns of people are. The economic concerns these days are more important than anything else that we can think of. And I don't think they are addressing those issues in ways that people need to see them. The majority of people are wary of sanctions. The majority of people are under huge economic pressure. And the satellite televisions are mostly focusing on other issues that are important, are very important, but are not the concerns of the majority of people. Would Khomeini ever give in to these kinds of democratic changes in the country? I don't think I can answer that question. I don't think I am very optimistic in that regard. But as Ms. Bahari said in the previous panel, it is very hard for any kind of democratic movement inside the country to have space, to have room for activism when the country, when the leadership has gone in sort of a defense mode, and the way things are moving right now, all we can expect is that the civil society will come under even more pressure.
Well, thank you very much, Rita. Before we start the panel, I asked Rita whether he's asked MEK representatives to be here or not. And it was half jokingly, because I believe that now that they are delisted, they should be part of the discourse, and all the Iranians of all different backgrounds and political opinions should be part of this discourse. But by this discourse, I mean the internal discourse that's going on in Iran. So as the Iranian community in the diaspora, I think the best we can do is to be part of the internal discourse in Iran. And we can do that now. Maybe 20 years ago, before the internet era, before, as Nazila said, before the satellite television, before the widespread use of satellite television, we could not be part of the internal discourse. But these days, whenever I talk to my friends in Iran, and I'm asking them, so what's happening? What is the situation? And he says, well, people are asking what's happening outside, and they're just looking outside, and they want to know what you guys think and what is being decided outside of Iran. So I think our main duty is to be part of this internal discourse in Iran. And I think the golden statement today was from Farida that Iran has politics, and I think all the different foreign ministries around the world that deal with Iran, they should have this statement, written in gold, maybe not gold, but written in something in their offices that Iran has politics. There are different forces within Iran, and we need to address all those different people. I mean, they can be radical members of the Revolutionary Guards, they can be indoctrinated supporters of the Basij, they can be Green Movement supporters, and we need to understand their narrative, and we need, as people who are living outside of the country, we need to interpret those narratives.
I support this idea very, very strongly. So let's go for a more pragmatic and more practical, I would say, policy making. And this is because since we were talking about politics, politics for me is a sphere of concrete responsibility. So when you say responsibility, you cannot act as Dr. Strangelove. I mean, Dr. Strangelove is not a responsible policy making, And we have it everywhere. We have it in Iran, we have it in the US, and we have it in Israel. So for me, I mean, the goal is to bring all the wise men and wise women who are in American politics, in American journalism, in American media, but also in the Iranian diaspora, and somehow to go in the direction, I would say, of challenging, of course, the totalitarian symptoms of the Iranian regime, but at the same time trying to withdraw the consent. And in this case, before finishing and getting to the Khamenei question very shortly, since we did talk about the MKO and the Mujahideen, I don't know why we insist to talk about MKO all the time as a terrorist group. It's a totalitarian group, in its principles and ideals. That's the worst part. Is because we know that, I mean, I'm not talking about the individuals as in when we were talking about Nazism, we were not talking about this Nazi or that Nazi, but you were talking about the Nazi ideology, and you were talking about the Nazi leadership. It's the same with the Mujahideen. For me, there is I have no illusion about the fact that this kind of, if America tomorrow supports, if Israel, if Europeans support this kind of alternatives for Iran, for the future of Iran, you are preparing a new, I would say, totalitarian regime for the future of Iran, which once again, as I can see in this room, so many educated people, so strong leaders, so many high-level, high-educated technocrats, artists, managers, journalists. Why the hell they have to go and live in with new totalitarian system? So would Khamenei give in? I think that this goes back to what I was trying to say. Khamenei will certainly give in the same way as the Burmese militaries are trying to give in, and in the same way as the apartheid regime gave in, if we choose the right strategies. And the right strategy, I don't think, is to, I'm not saying that we need to negotiate with them, but I think that supporting is Iranian civil actors, like what we had with the Green Movement, you know, the Green Movement was not supported, we have to be very frank, it was not supported by the American administration. And if it's supported in the same way as in Eastern Europe, the Solidarity was supported in Poland, or the Havel movement was supported in Czechoslovakia or elsewhere, I think this is where we can end beautifully, I mean, in a better way than we are today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I will answer your question, Rita, and maybe come back to what the Iranian diaspora can do in another round, if you give me the chance. A lot of good things have been said, and I want to just say I fully agree with what Ramin just said about Khamenei. Khamenei is a member in a balance of power between different networks inside a very complicated power structure. But that power structure, as we have seen in the past, can move, and as Ramin said, it will move if the right strategies are adopted. I also agree with Maziar and Nazila that the Green Movement is still alive. But back to Trita's question, what has happened since 2009, and is there any reason to be optimistic? First of all, what happened? I think the events of 2009, and especially the events since 2009, have made the aspiration of the Iranian people, if you want, more nuanced. I think the notion of democracy is a very vague notion. And it's also easy to be anti-democratic in a country like Iran, especially in the current world. I mean, they just turn around and say, look at the established democracies of Europe, and look at their economies. Is this a good idea? And so on. So I think the demands of the Iranian people have become more nuanced. And when I say more nuanced, it doesn't mean that they are not democratic anymore, but it's more clear. The Iranian people, and this is based on long-term research and interaction with Iranians inside Iran and so on, they are now asking for a more accountable and more transparent power structure. This is important. You can always say this is part of democracy, but it's important to be nuanced and to say what we want. As we heard from the other speakers, there is a greater demand for improved economic conditions. And it's clear that a lot of the problems are a result of mismanagement and corruption inside the country. Yes, there is also the sanctions element, and if there is time, we can discuss that. But the fact is, people are asking for better economic conditions, better economic management, and a better, more accountable governance structure. And finally, the Iranian people are asking for a more dignified position on the international stage. And they realize that some of the things our leaders are doing today are undermining our own position and image on the international stage. So the more nuanced debate has created a completely different political scene. For example, it's very interesting. Ramin and I were parts of an intellectual debate in Iran for years, where we always asked ourselves, how can we actually overcome some of the social divides in Iran? How can we overcome the ethnic divides, the religious divides, and so on? The fact is, the Green Movement actually overcame all of this. If you look at the people who are active in the Green Movement, they have actually overcome a lot of the social divides that we have had in our country, because they are all looking towards a completely different balance of power in the future, and I think that's very important. The push for the other results or the other consequence of the 2009 events has been that I call it the end of hypocrisy, the end of some of the people hiding behind Islamic values and so on. I can tell you, very religious people in Iran, even people who were supporters, very staunch supporters of the Islamic Republic, they actually turned their backs to the Islamic Republic after what happened in 2009, especially the violent clampdown, the imprisonment of innocent people, and so on. So there is a completely different relationship. People cannot hide behind so-called Islamic or Shiite values anymore. If they do, people will turn around, the population will turn around and say, well, you just looked at what happened. Did you ever protest at the level of violence against demonstrators in 2009? So we have a benchmark now. It's not unclear anymore. So the transparency, I think, is very important, and it's a way of pushing towards again a different balance of power. Now, with all of what I said, there is reason to be optimistic, because it's, for me, the events of 2009 and the emergence of the Green Movement and the new relationships within the Islamic Republic are the beginning of a process that will shake this power structure. I'm not saying it's going to collapse this power structure. It will shake it. And anything you shake will try to find a new equilibrium. And that new equilibrium is something that all of us have to help, that it becomes more transparent and more democratic. But I will come back how we can do it. We can help. All of us can help. And it's important that we are aware that there is a collective responsibility in that process.
Fantastic. These are great openers. I'm going to ask for more of a chaotic conversation now, where you guys please interrupt each other. I'm going to start off by going off of what was said earlier, in particular what you just said, Bijan. On the one hand, there seems to be consensus that there's an ability now for the diaspora to be part of the conversation, to be part of the discourse. Does that mean that the role of the diaspora is to follow, or are there areas in which the diaspora also can lead? And if there are areas that the diaspora can lead, it raises the question, how can you be an agent for greater democracy when the diaspora itself, unfortunately, is so undemocratic in its own culture?
So, I'm the most chaotic person, so I will respond first. I think this is exactly where we have to start. I do believe that culture is one of the problems in Iran. And it has nothing to do with the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran has managed to bring the worst dimensions of Iranian culture out in some of the behaviors. But as you said, some of the difficulties we all face also in our life in diaspora are related to our cultural deficiencies. And this is exactly one area where when the diaspora can lead. If we believe, as I do, that one of our problems is that we believe too much in win-lose solutions. We have a win-lose mentality. Let's be honest about it. The Americans will understand in the audience. We have a win-lose mentality. Doesn't matter where we are. Let's work to believe in win-win solutions. There are win-win solutions. There are everyday examples of win-win solutions. And that's where we can lead. We can come in with solutions, with concepts, whether it's in business or in culture and in other areas. So yes, I think there are areas where we can, Maziar said it very well, let's be realistic. This is part of realism, to know that we have cultural deficiencies. I can tell you as an anecdote, I just finished a book about the life of Hafiz. And it's very interesting. It's more than 600 years ago. And when you read that book, it's as if it's today's Iran. How different people try to undermine each other, how the political structure is structured, and so on. So we have to move on. We have to understand what the issues are, develop solutions, and most importantly, all of us, let's promise each other until the next leadership conference of NIAC next year to come up with some win-win solutions among ourselves and say it's possible, and I'm sure it will resonate inside Iran and inside intellectuals and so on. So there are ways we can.
Let me take it back another 2,000 years. If a Persian walks through the vineyard of another Persian, he doesn't taste the grapes just in case they might have been poisoned. This is even 1,000 years before Islam. We clearly have an issue.
I second Bijan what he said. I think we talk, as we've been talking, others always talk about having democracy in Iran, but I think we cannot have democracy without a culture of democracy, of course, it goes without saying. And I think one of the weaknesses that we have in Iranian diaspora, but it's also a symptom which comes from inside Iran out to outside Iran, is this charismatic syndrome. Everybody wants to be a leader, and we don't want to have teamwork. That's why some people don't like NIAC, and others say we like Mujahideen, and others say no, we like third people. And there's an absence of teamwork, which is very important. One of the, since you've been asking the question and talking about Charter 91, one of the inspirations that we had, especially I had, as one of the writers of the Charter 91, was to look at the experiences of other people, other nations. It happens that since I was a student in Paris, I was an activist for Eastern Europe. I met Havel, Mishnik, and others. And also, I was fighting for the liberation of Mandela at the time. So, Charter 77 and Charter 1955 of the Freedom Charter of South Africa was an inspiration for us. But also, we wanted actually not just call Iranian citizens inside and outside. By the way, 300 people have signed the charter in the past 3 weeks only, because it's only been 3 weeks that the charter is out, has been public. And 300 people, and among these 300, at least, I would say 60 or 70 are from inside Iran. So the issue was exactly what we're discussing. The issue was not only to blame the Iranian political system for the complete suppression of civil rights, but also to think the future of Iran. To say, let's work together under a charter. Let's have a voice, as Havel had in '77 and Patochka had, and as also in 1955, as Mandela and others, and the Chinese in 2008, as you know, they have a Charter 08 also. Let's have a charter for Iranians. And it's not a problem that is done outside Iran, because people inside Iran have been also consulting and helping us to do it, especially women. It's interesting that women activists are so courageous, where these political activists are. We hear the politicians and we hear Iranian political groups, but we don't listen to our students and women rights movements inside Iran who have been so active and been fighting so ferociously for democracy. So it's, Charter 91 is actually the articulation of our belief as Iranian citizens that not only we have rights, but we have responsibilities to prepare the future of Iran. To prepare it on what issues? For example, what goes directly to my heart, on nonviolent issues, on nonviolent strategies, on the fact that we don't want to be a nation of revengeful nation, on the fact that we need to find ways to work together, how to prepare a future government, how to prepare a future rule of law, and all these issues. And I do believe that at that level, Charter 91, like in Charter 77, could be a voice, international voice, you know, for not to represent Iranians, but to be a voice among other voices in saying that, well, we need to have somehow a core, a nonviolent core, and bring it in the heart of the global public opinion.
Maziar and Nazila, as two journalists who work so closely with activists, or interacted with activists in Iran, when you come outside, how would you rate us, the diaspora, when it comes to democratic culture? Be brutally honest.
Well, to be brutally honest, I think the diaspora is a microcosm of what's going on inside Iran. You know, you have certain educated, pro-democracy people all around the world, among the Iranian diaspora, and then you have some bigoted, racist people in different political groups. And some of them have been isolated for the past 30-odd years or so because they came out as a member of a political group. They didn't learn the language of their country that they're living in, they're hanging out with each other, they write for each other, they clap for each other, and as a result, they don't grow. So it's the same thing in Iran, that you have different cliques of people. But what I think we have to do is that, again, if we want to be realistic, we have to be realistic about the diaspora as well. That we can never make the Iranian diaspora totally democratic, but there are some people among the people in the diaspora who are pro-democracy, and they are moderate. And the majority of Iranians inside Iran and outside of Iran, they are moderates. But the difference is that we can give a voice to the people in the diaspora, the moderates, among the people in the diaspora, much easier than people inside Iran. Because if people inside Iran, they try to express a moderate opinion, they can be persecuted, they can be called a Baha'i, a Zionist, a spy, or whatever. But if you try to have a reasonable dialogue with someone who's moderate in a political group, whether it's an NIAC or a monarchist, or then they might be accused by their other members of the group, but at least they're not going to be incarcerated or tortured. So I think we have to try to find the moderates among us. We have to be principled. We have to agree on certain principles. I mean, Charter 91 is a good start, or it can be the Human Rights Charter. So we have to be principled, and we have to just address the basics of moderation, human dignity, and what we can all agree on. One thing that Bijan said, I just wanted to say that before I forget, is that people are asking each other whether they demonstrated in 2009 and they were against the violence. And the same kind of discourse is going on among the hardliners as well. For example, the mayor of Tehran, Ghalibaf, had an interview on Iranian television after a long time, and he did not use the word sedition in order to describe what happened in 2009. And he's being criticized because of that. And I think we have to celebrate these moments. These are the individual moments, but we have to celebrate them, we have to magnify them, and we have to try to address those parts of the characters of people like Ghalibaf and others who have some, moderate characteristics. Maybe as a, he said that he wanted to be an Islamic Reza Khan, an Islamic dictator, but he has certain moderate viewpoints that we have to magnify and we have to address.
Trita, you asked for honesty. I'm going to be very honest. I think the Islamic Republic was much more democratic than the Iranian expat community at one stage. Because a lot of things that we are hearing now that is challenging the Islamic Republic leadership came out inside Iran under Khamenei's rule. All these questions about how much power the Supreme Leader Vali Faqih should have, the Green Movement, and they tried to be the voice for it, but there is only one official spokesperson for it, Mr. Amir Arjman. Has he ever explained what is the agenda of the movement? Has the Iranian expats outside the country, has it ever pressured Mr. Amir Arjman to explain what kind of plan, what kind of agenda, or at least to explain some of the hostilities in the past that have led to this division among Iranians? One of those important issues is the massacre of political prisoners in 1989 in Iran, when Mr. Mousavi was a prime minister then. Was he involved? Did he know about it? What is their position now? And many, many other things. What kind of role do they want to see for the supreme leader? And I am not saying this just to increase the divisions and the fractures within the Iranian community outside the country, but as a way to start a conversation, to come up with solutions that will work, that will be able to provide a clear path. And while the Iranian community is so divided,
Mr. Amir Arjman, colleague.
While this conversation is not going on, the Iranian regime is systematically undermining this the civil society inside the country. I think the Green Movement was very much a vibrant civil society more than anything else, if we want to call it a name or not. And what it has done in the past month, for example, women had a very dominant presence in the movement. After the repression, women didn't go silent. They were one of the loudest voices that they kept talking and revealing about the repression that was going on. And the weblogs and the letters that they started writing to their husbands, publicizing the cases. And very smartly, the Iranian government has gone to undermine them where it really hurts. This decision to ban women from studying about 77 fields at 37 universities. This is something that can be carried out very easily. We know that this regime has done it in the beginning of the revolution. It went as far as closing universities for 3 years. I mean, young people who were supposed to be at universities were sitting home, and now they want to do the same thing to women. This is a path that can be reversed, and they have done it in the past. They have gone after very traditional fields like English literature, English translation, courses that women always dominated universities. The reason women were out there in 2009 was not just because they were frustrated. It was also because they were educated, they were empowered by education, and they were demanding rights that they knew the government was depriving them from those rights. So if the government does keep them at homes, does confine them to their homes, it is very systematically undermining this very vibrant movement. And what has the Iranian community outside the country has done? We know that international campaigns help. We have people here who are out of prison now because of these international campaigns. I have no doubt that Maziar Bahari wouldn't have been released if it was not because of the pressure by the international community. I really don't know. I mean, I still don't know if this news is correct that women would not be able to study 77 courses. The reason for that is because we have not followed up, because we have not started a campaign.
Can I come in? I think the reaction to the social role of women, which you are highlighting here, is a bit more complicated than just dealing with the political aspect of women's roles. We had a census in Iran, 2011, and the final results of the census were published about 2 months ago. I'm sure all of you have read it. There are some very, very interesting socio-economic facts and developments that are coming out of this census. Most important is we have, I don't remember the exact figure, but something like 10% of the Iranians between 24 and 35 years old are leading single households. I mean, they are just single. They haven't gotten married. This is exactly the age where you get married in Iran. And not only they are not married, they have moved out of their parents' homes, a completely new phenomenon in Iran. When I moved back to Iran in 1992 and got my own apartment, I was really frowned upon by everyone. But this is now, about 10% of the population in that age group has decided to live this way. It's a completely different, if you are a conservative, traditional Iranian, you think this is a dangerous development. What kind of, society are we living in? And there are other things. Single-headed households, more successful by women than by men. These are all results of the official census. This is not what I'm saying. Go and read the results of the census. Very, very interesting. So we are now witnessing a panicky reaction to that. The first one, and it's sad to hear that the whole technocracy of the country was waiting for Mr. Khamenei to come out and say these developments are worrying, and then the next day they said we have put an end to all birth control policies in Iran. This was also an reaction because basically the population is going back. These modern urban families, they don't want to have children anymore. And as I said, many of them even don't want to get married. So there is one important element, and again, being realistic, I endorse that fully. Maybe one of the things we can do to debate some of these things in a completely different way. There are limitations on what you can say and write inside Iran. But we can write and debate it outside Iran. You know, why can't we debate this issue? We should have an opinion as the Iran diaspora on what would we do if we had the results of the census. Would we correct any of our policies? Would we try to educate the society differently? Would we improve the economic conditions? For example, one of the reasons for the situation is definitely the economic conditions. I know people who don't want to have children because it's too expensive. You know, so there are areas where we can actually, as my co-panelists are saying, you know, that we can actually engage the developments in Iran and try to debate it.
And I think, and I think, I mean, continuing what Bijan said, we are hearing the word debate, dialogue, discourse, and it's very important to give a voice to the Iranians, because what the Iranian government, right, this part of the government is doing is that it's trying to stifle all kinds of voices except for whatever voice that they want to hear at a certain moment. And I think as a community in the diaspora, it is our duty to not only to have our voices and to express our opinions, but also give a voice to the Iranians and not tell them what to say or not to guide them, because they know what to say and they have clear, articulate ideas about what they want to say, but to give them the technology and to allow them to express themselves. And they can be anything from, you know, fighting the sanctions against companies like Google, and you know, and allowing the software companies to give their software to Iranians, to have different kinds of websites where Iranians can express themselves. And one of the most important things that I think will change the Iranian society in a short term, and I promise you, is to have a satellite internet for Iranians. I mean, you guys live in the United States, or Canada, or the UK, wherever we live, because I think that is what's missing in different governments, especially in the United States. But I think they do not understand the Iranian narrative. The different Iranian narratives, let's say, that, you know, what is the narrative of this young Basiji in a remote area in Iran who says that he's willing to die for Khamenei and who says death to America? Is he really willing to die for Khamenei, and you know, does he really want death for America? We need to understand that. And I think as a community in the diaspora, we really need to understand those narratives. And we need to be realistic as well. You know, we need to understand that there is a government in Iran, whether we want it or not. It is a government that is in charge of the natural resources of the country. It is in charge of the oil money. It is in charge of the army. And whether we want it or not, this is the government that we have to deal with. I mean, in an ideal world, I would have loved to have Ramin as the president of Iran, but it's not in the cards. Or, I don't know, Golshifteh Farahani as a prime minister, but that's not in the cards. So we need to deal with. What kind of
ideal world are you looking for?
It's very dysfunctional like this. So we need to be realistic about our understanding of Iran, and I think one of the problems with the Iranian opposition in the past 33 years in the diaspora is that they've been very idealistic, unrealistic, and as a result, they've become irrelevant. And I think if we want to be relevant, if we want to, and maybe part of it was that because they could not be part of this internal discourse, that they could not have an exchange of opinion with the Iranians inside Iran. Trita said that maybe the Green movement or the pro-democracy movement is almost dead. Was that
no, I'm asking rhetorically.
Okay, rhetorically.
Not declaring that.
Okay, yeah. But I think actually, I think maybe the manifestations of the pro-democracy movement is not apparent and we cannot see it. But I think the movement is deepening, and actually the fact that I had this conversation with someone the other day that I think the fact that we don't know what we want is a plus. because we are not living in a world of 1979 that people were certain, my parents' generation were certain what they wanted, and they were willing to die for it, and as a result, they were willing to kill for that ideal. I think this idea that we are discussing different things, as Nazila said, you know, someone like Jahenbegloo was Khamenei's advisor, he's asking about the whole notion of hijab. There's a very good site called Iran Diplomacy and Iran History, which both of them are run by Sadegh Kharazi, whose sister is Khamenei.
Whose wife is Khamenei's?
No. Sadegh Kharazi's sister is Khamenei's son's wife. Khamenei's sister, daughter-in-law. Yeah. Sadegh Kharazi, both of these sites are run, and they're asking fundamental questions about different periods in Iranian history. They're talking about, I mean, not directly, but they're having this discourse about different things, about the Nojib coup, for example. They're talking about the 1987 massacres and all that. So I think this discourse is going on in Iran, and Iranians gradually are trying to find the answer to this question, that what do we want to replace this government with. So as a result, Khamenei, the question of Khamenei, whether he's going to surrender to the democratic needs of Iranian people or not, it depends on how democratic needs manifest themselves and how much Iranians need democracy at the moment. Khamenei has been a very clever, brutally clever, and very cynically pragmatic leader in the past 20-odd years since he became a supreme leader. What he's been doing is that he's been surrounding himself with a group of devotees, but at the same time, he's been manipulating different factions within the government to fight against themselves. And also, he's been trying to reduce these maybe democratic needs of the Iranian people. Maybe, you know, when we're talking about Iranians being hungry for democracy, maybe Iranians are not hungry for democracy. Khamenei wants to keep Iranians hungry, period, you know, and maybe peckish for democracy at the moment, you know, that they want to have a little bit of democracy, but they want to, first of all, overcome their hunger because of the economic situation. So I think if we as Iranians in the diaspora be the voice of that democratic movement in Iran, and maybe even the democratic movement is dormant, we have to get in touch with the zeitgeist of this democratic movement inside Iran and be the voice of that and give a voice to the people inside Iran, outside. So that is the main thing.
Ramin.
Thank you, Trita, for the invitation, and thank you for having this panel of I mean, educated alumni. I don't know why people attack so much NIAC when you have a panel of ex-prisoners.
One day.
Yes. Anyway, Ambassador Hunter said that we will be irritated if he says that Iran is a second-rate country. I think Iran is a third-rate country because of its political decision-makers, but it's a first-rate country because of its civic actors and civil society, which is one of the, I think, the strongest in the Middle East and the most educated one.
On that point, Ramin, I hate to interrupt you, but as you saw in the beginning, Ambassador Hunter came up to me and he just wanted to clarify that he had misspoken. He meant that it is a second-rate country when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to its geopolitical weight. But as you probably understood from the rest of his presentation, and as he told me, he thinks it's a first-rate country when it comes to its people, when it comes to its culture, and when it comes to its civilization. He just wanted to clarify that because he did not intend to offend anyone.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say. I was not offended. I'm just pointing out that I myself, as a civil society activist, Iran has one of the strongest, actually, as you know, civil societies because of all the struggles which has been done in the past 35 years by women's rights movements, one of the best, I think, and I think we have to all be proud of all the women who have been fighting for the past 35 years in Iran and outside Iran, students, intellectuals, and everything. But I mean, related to your question is, and I do believe that the role of democratization that has been pointed out by so many speakers, Farideh, Maziar, Nazila, and others, I'm sure Bijan is going to come back to that. It's practically, most of it has been done and will be done by the civic actors. And I think it has to do with the fact that when we're talking about the Iranian nation, a nation for me is a principle. It's a culture, it's a people, it's a history, as we know. And it would be a crime, and going back to what we're seeing today at the level of international relations in regard to Iran, it would be a crime to shatter all that because of some thieves and murderers who represent themselves as the representatives of this nation. So for me, to answer your question, I think that the highest rule goes back to dissent, which is for me the highest form of patriotism today among Iranians. And dissent is not only the role of those who at some point like us went to prison or are still in prison back in Iran, but it's also the role of the diaspora. Iranian diaspora in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, in the Philippines, anywhere where you have Iranians. And I think it's very important to understand that what kind of a tactic and what kind of a strategy we choose and how much we support these tactics and strategies. As for one, I've always been for nonviolent strategies, which I think is the best strategy to have today in order to have somehow, first of all, support the civic actors inside Iran, but at the same time to push governments like the US government and US officials, but also Canadian, but also Europeans, to make them understand that the Iranian civil society has been fighting for its rights for a long period of time, non-violently, and they need support. And the issue number one is not the nuclear, as we all say, but the violation of human rights. If the issue number one is the violation of human rights in Iran, let's go and support those who are fighting for human rights, which means, once again, women, students, intellectuals, workers, and others. So I do believe that nonviolent resistance comes as a priority today, and it's not just because it's ethical, but it's also because it's strategic. I consider it as a strategic imperative, not just as a moral or ethical imperative. And that's one point which I think is very important to underline. The second point is that if we are thinking also about the future of Iran and not short-sighted only about what's going to happen in the next few months, we need to think about in the same ways as I do, in the same ways as we think about the transition from apartheid to a new regime in South Africa, in the same way as is happening in Myanmar, in the same way as in Eastern Europe. We have to think of how we're going to deal with the future of Iran. Are we planning to have revenge? Are we planning to have transitional justice? Are we planning to have a consent among people? One of the points which is very important, nobody puts it on the table, and I think is one of the priorities, is how we can withdraw the consent which is given today to Khamenei and to some of the leaders like Ahmadinejad and others, not only by some political officials or representatives or let's say Majlis, the parliament members, the MPs, but also by some of the pastarans, the Revolutionary Guards or the Basij. How can we withdraw this consent from them? How can we help them to overcome their fear of us? I, for one, I don't want to put fear in their hearts by saying, you know, we're going to come and destroy, and we need to also And because of that, we need, I would say, our strategy should be to listen and to learn from each other, rather just to lead each other. Because all of us, most of us, actually not all of us, most of us, we start talking about leadership before listening and learning from each other. So if there are 3 L's, I would say listening, learning, leading comes at the 3rd level, not at the 1st level. And this is also a new psychology. But we have a co-responsibility to go beyond stereotypes and give a correct image of Iran as our nation to Americans, to Canadians, to North Americans, to Europeans, to Japanese, anybody else, Chinese, Russians, a correct image of the country. And to do that, I would say we need to educate ourselves civically. We need a civic education. And civic education is, I mean, the question was put forward. We need to, if we don't have this civic education, how can we have a teamwork? How can we say that we are better, we know how to govern or manage the future of Iran because we are more educated? No, we have to understand that, I'm sure that most of you agree with me, Iran is a country of diversity. Iran is a traditional country, but it's like India, and it's a modern country at the same time. Educated, modern people, dressed modern, but also, as we can see, religious people and people with very diverse. So we have to take into consideration this diversity, and this diversity is also part of this civic education that we need to have.
I'm going to ask the last question, and I'm going to open up for the floor. We're going to go over time a little bit because we actually have a little bit more time. One of the recurring themes have been that there's things that people inside cannot do, and as a result, outside we may have to have a greater responsibility to take care of those things. Then combine it with the fact what was said earlier on, all politics are local. And the politics and the things that we also can do that the people inside of Iran cannot do, at least not to the same extent, is to either voice their views or have activities for or against some of the policies of the outside world. The conversation so far has been very centric on Iran in a way that is good. The more the future of Iran comes from the Iran, I think that would be a positive thing. But we can't be blind to the fact that there are external factors that also affect things. What would be helpful or unhelpful when it comes to what the outside world would, is, or could be doing? Whether it is negotiations, is that a good or a bad thing? War, is that a good or a bad thing? I think some questions may be obvious, but they need to be asked nevertheless. Sanctions. We have had them for quite some while now. I think we have more data. Is it a good or bad thing? What is the role of the diaspora on issues like that? Particularly mindful of the fact that the people in Iran have very little ability to have any impact.
If we go back to how I opened my remarks, basically saying that the Iranian society, this is my belief, and it's not just a guesstimate, it's studied, wants better governance structures, wants improved economic conditions, and also wants a better place in the world, then it's very easy to identify that the current confrontational approach to Iran, especially the sanctions, are actually undermining all those 3 aspects. So all the 3 aspirations of the Iranian people, as I mentioned. The economic pressure on the Iranian society, and we know it is there, is undermining the economic well-being. The existence of sanctions and sort of threats and confrontational policies gives the government and the regime as a whole an excuse to, just explain mismanagement and corruption and ambiguity, because then they say, well, we are on the sanctions. And President Ahmadinejad and others have used this a number of times, saying, oh, because of the sanctions, we can't disclose information, or we can't explain why this is happening. And then the third one, obviously, if our country gets called a rogue state all the time and a terrorist state and so on, it's not helping our international standing. I know that there is an illusion, in my view, that if this situation gets to a certain point, then the Iranian people will rise against the Islamic Republic. My personal belief is that's an illusion, and I think the Iranian people have had their experience with the violent upheaval, and I think it's great to have people like Ramin and others who are working on non-violent concepts, because I think that's what the Iranian people want, a non-violent evolution. But what can we do? So if these confrontational approaches are bad, wherever we can, we have to confront them. We have to say they are bad. We have to say that there must be, and we have to look for alternative ways. And I believe there are alternative ways. Dialogue, negotiations, and so on. Obviously, that probably will be another panel if you want to come up with the ways. But there are other things we can do. First of all, I know that the Iranian Americans as a whole are burdened with the current sanctions. But I also know people, Iranian Americans, who go and get their OFAC license every year to be able to transfer a bit of technology to Iran. One of my very good friends is doing that, for example, in the medical field. And by transferring technology to Iran, he does two things, and I'm sure there are others. One, he helps create new jobs and create new knowledge in Iran. And then he helps, relieve some of these isolationist realities that have become a consequence of the current policy. The other thing is, if you believe in that notion of the Iranians want a more dignified place in the world, all of us can play a role. All of us can identify areas where Iran can, or the true Iranian reality, whether it's in civil society development, whether it's in arts or sports. I mean, when Asghar Farhadi comes and wins the Oscars, that's pride for all of us, for Iranians inside Iran and outside Iran. When Iranian sports people come out and win medals, it's good. Let's support these activities. It's not impossible to support them. Don't hide behind the sanctions and other things. It is possible, and we can identify them. And I think maybe this is also one area for NIAC to come forward and say, there are sports people or artists and others who are looking for support, and I believe that it's a part of our responsibility, because that can, again, present a completely different image of Iran, and then also help to achieve the aspirations of the Iranian people.
Well, I think one of the main problems of the Iranian diaspora, especially the Iranian Americans, is that they do not interpret or translate the American narrative or Israeli narrative for Iranians. And many people in Iran, they do not know why the United States is imposing these sanctions on Iran. They do not know why Prime Minister Netanyahu says those things in the UN. He is not Netanyahu is not a stupid man. I mean, what he did in the UN was very stupid, but there is a logic behind what he did. And the Iranian government is portraying a very simple-minded, very black and white picture of Israel and the United States for Iranian people. What we have to do is that we have to understand the narratives, because this is basically a question of different narratives that we have. We have to interpret and translate those narratives and explain it to the Iranian people that why the US is doing that. And at the same time, if we are giving the voice to the Iranians, we can create this dialogue between the Americans and the Iranians, in the cyberspace, or the virtual dialogue between the two governments and two countries.
You should not ask for my permission.
Yes. I think that there are several problems here. First of all, I think that if we want to continue our civic action, we need to keep consciously a higher moral ground. That's for sure. We need to have this higher moral ground for the good reason that if we are accusing violence coming from the leadership in Iran, we cannot have the same level of violence among us or for the future of Iran. So that's one thing for me. Second is that we need to continue the ways of dialogue with inside Iran. And when I say inside Iran, it's mainly with the civic actors inside Iran. Because they, like in the Green Movement, they're going to decide for what's going to happen. And it's a very important negotiation, actually, yes, negotiation, but with whom? If tomorrow somebody like Mousavi or Karoubi comes and says, well, like they did in Myanmar, or de Klerk did with Mandela, if they say, well, we have now power and we want to change Iran, And would we come and say, no, we want to kill you? No, certainly, I mean, the wise decision would be, like Mandela did, say, well, okay, we want to have strategies of non-violent strategies, non-conventional strategies of deciding to have a better world for our children, for our future. Nobody talks about the children of Iran. I mean, children of Iran are suffering from pollution, from violence, from prejudice, and actually we're fighting for these children, for the future of Iran. It belongs to these children, to our children and grandchildren. So that's one very important to understand. But thirdly, in regard to Americans and Iranian Americans, and I would say in general, because now that I'm in the US, let's talk a little bit about America and American dream. I think that it's important to eventually, if we want to sell the Iranians the American dream, why don't we give them the right direction of the American dream? What is the American dream? Nobody, the ambassadors here present, they didn't talk about that. The American dream actually is not G.W. Bush or Romney. It's Martin Luther King, Henry David Thoreau, Emerson, you know? This is actually the American dream that we can, and it's an American dream of peace, and it's an American dream of condemning violence and also of solidarity. So if Americans have something to teach us, if they think they can teach us, why don't they go with the message of Lincoln and Martin Luther King instead of going with the war games, you know?
And open up to questions. Actually, wait till the microphone arrives.
So I'm very interested in this question that you all raised about how to democratize our own community here, and I think that's the reason why I'm involved with NIAC to begin with. And I think one of the big challenges that we have, different from other communities, is that in conversations I have with Iranians who are really worried about what's going on in Iran and want to do something here, they have family in Iran, they want to go back, they want to travel, and they're petrified that if their name is on a website, if their email address is tracked to be connected with a political organization, they could be in prison, or something could happen to their family. And I can't in good conscience tell them, that won't happen, don't worry, come and get involved, this is important. And it's a tough tension.
You can always do it anonymously. They don't have to put their real names and addresses on there.
Well, but the flip side of that is what we all care about in democracy is sort of the freedom of expression. And we have people who do in the Bay Area, they are anonymously involved, but they can't go meet with their congressperson. They can't stand up on stage and express their views, and I think it's important, but ultimately if we want to have political muscle as a community, it can't all be anonymously too.
Yeah, but the thing is that we have to be, again, realistic about these things. First of all, they have to express something, and then we can get to the point that they have a transparency and reveal their identities. I think the internet and different fora, they are allowing people to express their opinions, and if you know someone who is in Iran and is a real person and can tell you something, you don't have to reveal the name of the person publicly. You can tell your congressman or congresswoman or senator that my cousin is saying this, and my cousin is pro-American and pro-Western, pro-democracy, and he's saying or she's saying that the sanctions are wrong and sanctions are hurting people. So I think there are different ways to do that, and again, we cannot be idealistic and unrealistic about these things. We have to understand that there is a brutal regime in Iran that is going to brutalize people at its own will. But there are people there who can express themselves.
If I can come in, I think, and I don't live in the US, but obviously I observe what's happening here. I can tell you there are enough people, Iranian, non-Iranian, organizations and so on, who are standing up for the right values. So all it takes is to support those people and those entities. You don't have to come out yourself and say, I am Bijan Khajehpour and I stand up for this, if you have certain concerns, and those concerns are valid. But there are enough avenues to support the right ideas and the right initiatives. And I think, again, before I said don't hide behind sanctions, also this, don't hide behind the possible persecution of family members in Iran. We also all have family in Iran. You know, we are not that, you know, it's just there are lots of people also in the audience who are doing things. So identify the right ideas and initiatives and the ones that are closest to your values and support them. And there are many ways to support them. We don't have to be a rich person to support someone. A small donation, even an email of support, I can tell you, will go a long way.
Thank you, panel. I really appreciate your insight. The question I have is kind of a continuation of thought from last night's discussion that we had with Colonel Wilkinson. And at the end of that discussion, I think Trita raised the question, and another person from the audience also raised the question of how the United States can get involved in a dialogue with the Iranian government, because the Colonel was talking about his meeting with Ambassador Khazai, and also he's planning to meet tomorrow with the Foreign Minister Salehi in New York. And the question came up, how can they get into a dialogue with the Iranian government without legitimizing the oppression or legitimizing the system? And I think that's the question that always comes up, and if I felt correctly, Dr. Jahenbegloo also noted in his final remarks. How can we really support a dialogue, and is that really relevant? I mean, our discourse with the Iranian government and our, I would say, problems with the Iranian government, is it relevant to be imposed on a foreign agent discussion with Iran or not? How could we be somehow separated from that dialogue, whether it's happening or not? Because in my opinion, as I'm sure many of you believe, that dialogue needs to happen prior to have a democratization in Iran, force getting ground. Similarly to, as Nazila was saying about the coming into power of Khatami, in my opinion, was a result of some sort of social building in Iran, the civil society that was created, the economic advancement in the country, and all of those, which are now have gone back 100 years because of the 2009 election.
I think we are at a stage we have to support those kinds of initiatives. If it was like September or October 2009, a lot of people would have been very emotional over any kind of conversation with the Iranian government, but now over 3 years has passed. Things are quite different inside the country. The movement has been quite alienated, and a lot of people are looking for some kind of solution to get out of this standoff. I think as Iranian diaspora, we have to encourage those kinds of solutions. At this point, I think the only legitimate way to put an end to the standoff is diplomacy. And if the U.S. government can offer Iran a face-saving solution, why not? The government is weak. The regime is, I don't think it has ever been at such a sensitive time, except, for example, during the years of the war ended in 1988, when the country was isolated, the economy was in a bad shape, people were frustrated. We're exactly in that situation. So if there is any way that can end this very chaotic situation and bring some stability to people's lives, this regime will have to reform itself from within, and why not support those kinds of dialogues?
And I think you always have to negotiate with your enemies or opponents. You can have a drink with friends, but you have to negotiate with your enemies. I mean, the fact is that Khamenei is the supreme leader of Iran, and he is in charge of the Revolutionary Guards, and he controls the oil revenue, whether we want it or not. So we have to support, if we are supporting negotiations, we have to support the negotiations with Khamenei, because the United States can talk to Mr. Mousavi or Karoubi as much as it wants, but nothing can happen. So we have to support these negotiations. And the negotiations can be unilateral as well. You know, if the United States, if the American president send a letter to Khamenei, an open letter, asking for negotiations, it means that it is legitimizing negotiations, not legitimizing the government. Because, you know, this is the government that, you know, have to solve issues with.
I would add to that. I think we should not underestimate the force of public diplomacy. We have a tendency, especially in Washington, D.C., to always think of lobbying with the politician at the House of Representatives or elsewhere, but I think that public diplomacy also is very important in this type of negotiation, as it has been done in other countries. I mean, we should not, it's good that Noam Chomsky is coming, for example, to NIAC's conference, leadership conference, because I think the role which has been played, and once again, I go back to what happened in Eastern Europe or in South Africa, intellectuals, artists, they always play a very important role. I mean, civic actors, when I say we, I mean Iranian diaspora outside Iran has a tendency to think always in conspiracy, you know, theory, by saying, well, at the end, only politicians decide. But so we don't go and find artists who can support us, like they supported the anti-apartheid movement, or as they supported Havel and others. We never do that. We try to go and find somebody at the House of Representatives who nobody. I mean, somebody that is. We have to be frank. I mean, these people might not care, but an artist might care. And I think that these people can be good mediators, especially in the way, in a very peaceful way.
Let me say a couple of sentences. I agree with the public diplomacy dimension, and I think it fits into with what I want to say. Let's concentrate on the Iranian side for a second and see what the problem is. The problem is there is a dominant narrative that says the US will always try to confront us no matter what the Islamic Republic of Iran does. And that narrative has led to a lot of distrust and so on. Now, if you want to prepare the ground for a completely different strategy towards Iran, the first step has to be to break that narrative. And delisting the MKO and, you know, all the other things that we are doing right now are being done in Washington and in Europe are not helping. They are actually confirming that narrative. So you don't have to necessarily immediately enter into a dialogue to say we have a different strategy. You can start dismantling the narrative, you can send out messages and basically say the US or Europe or the Western countries are not against progress in Iran, they're not against democratization in Iran, they're not against the Islamic Republic. They are for a certain set of values, and then you can start engaging different groups, I agree, including civil society people on those levels.
Great.
Maziar mentioned inclusivity of other organizations and so on, and Trita mentioned undemocratic nature of the diaspora. Those of us who've been foolish enough to go on forums in different areas or engage MEK or what I call Iranian no-conservatives, know the kind of wrath that we face. And now there are other, and these organizations are getting larger. Now there are American organizations like United Against Atomic Iran who have multi-million-dollar budgets that are basically pushing their own agenda. So my question to you is, how do you deal with these people that it's incredibly difficult to have a conversation with, or a civil conversation? Now they have this site called Iranian Traders, and Trita is right on the front page. That's question number one. The other thing is the role of the diaspora on the day after. I think that is something which is extremely important, which I think is a kind of a conversation, maybe is premature now, but I think will be extremely important.
Day after what? Can you explain that?
Yeah, day after when the regime changes.
Well, I think in terms of MEK and other organizations, I mean, The organization, the United Against Iran, or what is the other one, UN Watch, and these organizations, they are specific organizations for specific purposes, but MEK is different. MEK is an organization of Iranian people. It's a cult. I think Ramin might be able to answer the day after, because he's studying the day after in terms of transitional justice, and there was a conference in London for transitional justice last time.
Yes, I certainly second you in the idea that we have to dialogue, especially with individuals, not only the political parties or political organizations, but we have to think in terms of individuals. Because even with MKO and other political groups, the leftist Iranians or others, as we can see, individuals are the ones who can doubt about what they've been doing. Organizations never do that. Individual, and so we have to dialogue with individuals. And in regard with the day after, I think that if we continue to think in terms of non-conventional strategies like nonviolence and in which way we can somehow administrate and manage this nonviolence at the level of justice, for example. These are all points which have been brought up in Charter 91. Charter 91 is actually not only about, you can go and read it on the website and in the Facebook, it's not just about what's happening right now and fighting for civil rights, but also how we can think about a new Iran, how we can think about a new Iran for our children, about the rights that even the environment, the environment. I mean, all these aspects have been taken in, and we're talking about it, and I think it's that the day after, as you say, which is actually the title of a movie which I don't like, because it's apocalyptic, and I don't want to see my country being apocalyptic like that, I think it has to go through, take some of the experiences which has been done in other countries, like the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in South Africa, in Chile, in Argentina, and elsewhere. We need to open our eyes and ears and listen to how others have been doing it, and not just say, look like this and say, well, we are Iranians and we want to go only one path. We have to see what is the experience of Mandela, Havel, Aung San Suu Kyi, and many others. It's going to be very helpful, I would say.
Just one second. This is something I've learned from Ramin, so I give credit to him. We Iranians have also one tendency, and that's trying to define ourselves by the other rather than through ourselves. So it's become more popular to reject someone else and then to say, well, I'm the one who rejected that someone else. I think we should just encourage everyone, no matter who they are, what background, to say who they are and what they want, and not antagonize them. Just say, give them a chance. If the different organizations, just Charter 91 is an excellent start into that process. If others have other ideas, they should write their own charter. And if you have problems, initially, where virtual space helps us, put out your ideas, stop rejecting others. That's exactly what the Islamic Republic does. We have to basically speak for ourselves and our own values, and I'm sure then you will understand that there is a lot of overlap.
With that, we have to stop, but all of our speakers are going to be around and they're going to be with us for lunch, so definitely engage with them. Please give them a round of applause.